Have you ever wondered why the moment you stop chasing people, they suddenly begin to notice you? Why the person who once ignored your presence starts searching for your attention? It isn't luck. It isn't magic. It is a law hidden beneath human behavior. A law most people spend their entire lives violating. The more desperately you seek attention, the less valuable you appear. But the moment you reclaim your attention, everything changes. From the day you entered this world, you were quietly taught that giving more of yourself would make you more loved. Smile more, reply faster, be available. Never disappoint anyone. Make people comfortable, even if it means making yourself uncomfortable. Over time, this became more than good manners. It became a habit, a dangerous habit. Without realizing it, you began treating your attention as if it had no value. Every message received an instant reply. Every request became your responsibility. Every opinion affected your emotions. Slowly, your life stopped revolving around your purpose and started revolving around the expectations of others. Human beings rarely appreciate what is constantly available. This is not because people are cruel. It is because the mind quickly adapts to certainty. When something is always there, it fades into the background. It becomes ordinary, predictable, expected. Think about the sun. It rises every morning without fail, yet few people stop to admire it. But let a rare eclipse appear, and millions will travel across countries just to witness a few minutes of darkness. The value did not suddenly appear. The scarcity made people notice what had always existed. Your attention works the same way. When you give it away without intention, people stop recognizing it as a gift. They begin to see it as an entitlement. They assume you will always answer, always agree, always wait. And when your attention becomes predictable, your presence quietly loses its impact. This is why many people feel invisible despite trying so hard to be noticed. They believe the solution is to give even more messages, more explanations, more effort, more emotional energy. But every extra attempt silently communicates one thing: I need your approval. Neediness has a language that requires no words. People sense it long before they hear it. It appears in the inability to tolerate silence. It appears in the fear of being misunderstood. It appears in the constant urge to prove your worth. Ironically, the harder you try to convince people of your value, the more uncertain that value appears. Confidence behaves differently. A confident person does not withhold attention to manipulate others. They simply understand that attention is one of the most valuable resources they possess. Like time, it cannot be recovered once spent. They choose carefully where it goes. They invest it in meaningful conversations, purposeful work, genuine relationships, and personal growth. They are not difficult to reach because they want to seem important. They are selective because they understand that protecting their focus protects their life. The moment you stop scattering your attention everywhere, something remarkable begins to happen. People notice the absence of what they once took for granted, not because you became colder, but because your presence is no longer ordinary. It has weight, it has intention, it has value. And the greatest transformation is not that others begin to notice you. It is that for the first time, you begin to notice yourself. Most people believe attraction begins with appearance, intelligence, or charm. But beneath all of these lies something far more powerful: emotional independence. It is invisible, yet everyone can feel it. You have probably met someone who wasn't the loudest person in the room, yet their presence carried undeniable weight. They didn't compete for attention. They didn't interrupt to prove a point. They didn't seem worried about whether people liked them. Their calmness spoke louder than words ever could. That quiet strength is not an accident. It is the result of building a life that does not depend on constant approval. The greatest trap many people fall into is confusing kindness with emotional dependence. They believe that caring means always saying yes. They believe loyalty means sacrificing their own peace. They believe love means placing another person's happiness above their own emotional well-being. At first, this feels noble. It feels generous. But over time, something begins to disappear. Their confidence fades. Their identity becomes blurred. They wake up each day wondering how others feel about them, instead of asking themselves how they truly feel. The human mind is remarkably sensitive to emotional signals. Long before people analyze your words, they sense your emotional state. If your happiness rises and falls with someone else's attention, that instability becomes visible. Every delayed reply feels like rejection. Every short conversation becomes a source of overthinking. Every moment of silence transforms into anxiety. Without realizing it, you hand control of your emotions to people who may not even realize they possess it. This is where emotional independence changes everything. An emotionally independent person still values relationships. They still appreciate love, friendship, and connection. But they refuse to let these things become the foundation of their identity. Their confidence is built from within, not borrowed from the opinions of others. They enjoy companionship, but they do not fear solitude. They welcome respect, but they do not beg for it. They accept affection, but they never measure their worth by how much attention they receive. Ironically, this inner stability makes them more attractive. Not because they are pretending not to care, but because they genuinely understand that their peace cannot be negotiated. There is a quiet confidence in someone who knows they will be okay whether people stay or leave. That confidence removes pressure from every interaction. It creates space for authenticity instead of desperation. Many people spend years chasing acceptance because they fear being alone. But loneliness is not always the absence of people. Sometimes it is the absence of yourself. You can stand in a crowded room surrounded by friends and still feel empty because you abandoned your own needs to satisfy everyone else's expectations. Real confidence begins the moment you stop asking, "How do I make them choose me?" and start asking, "Am I choosing a life that respects my own values?" That single shift changes your posture, your decisions, and the energy you bring into every relationship. When your emotional world is no longer controlled by the reactions of others, you stop seeking attention and you begin attracting genuine respect. Because the strongest presence is built by those who first learn to stand firmly on their own. Once you begin valuing your own attention, another uncomfortable truth reveals itself. Many of the things you believed were acts of love were actually acts of fear. You weren't calling them because you wanted to. You were afraid they would forget you. You weren't explaining yourself because clarity was necessary. You were afraid of being misunderstood. You weren't always the first to apologize because you were wrong. You were afraid of losing the connection. Fear has a remarkable ability to disguise itself as devotion. The instinct to chase is deeply human. When someone becomes distant, your mind immediately begins searching for answers. You replay conversations. You analyze every word. You wonder what changed. Then, driven by anxiety rather than wisdom, you reach out again. Another message, another explanation, another attempt to repair something that may not even be broken. Yet the more you chase certainty, the further peace seems to drift away. This happens because genuine connection cannot be forced. Human relationships are like open hands. Hold them gently, and they remain. Grip them too tightly, and they slip away. The harder you try to control another person's attention, the more pressure they begin to feel. Even if they cannot explain it, they sense an invisible weight. The expectation to respond, to reassure, to constantly prove their feelings. What began as affection slowly starts to feel like obligation. People are naturally drawn toward freedom, not pressure. They enjoy relationships where they can choose to be present, not where they feel emotionally cornered. This is why relentless pursuit often produces the opposite of its intended result. Instead of creating closeness, it creates emotional distance. There is another consequence that is even more damaging. Every time you chase someone who is pulling away, you slowly abandon yourself. Your routines begin to disappear. Your focus weakens. Your goals lose importance. Your emotional world starts revolving around another person's decisions instead of your own purpose. Without realizing it, you stop living your life and begin waiting for someone else's response to determine your mood. The strongest individuals understand something different. They know that not every silence demands an answer. Not every distance requires pursuit. Sometimes silence is simply information. It reveals who is willing to invest, who is merely curious, and who only enjoyed receiving your constant attention. Instead of chasing clarity through endless effort, they allow time to expose reality. This does not mean becoming cold, arrogant, or emotionally unavailable. It means respecting the natural rhythm of human relationships. Interest that is genuine does not require endless persuasion. Respect that is authentic does not need constant reminders. If someone values your presence, they will eventually make room for it. And if they do not, no amount of chasing can manufacture what is absent. Ironically, when you stop pursuing people out of fear, something changes inside you. Your conversations become calmer. Your decisions become wiser. You stop reacting to every emotional impulse and begin responding with intention. The energy you once spent trying to hold on to people is redirected toward building a life worth living. And there is something quietly magnetic about a person who has discovered that their greatest strength is not the ability to chase, but the courage to let go when necessary, because true attraction begins where desperation ends. As you stop chasing and begin standing firmly within yourself, another ability starts to emerge, one that most people overlook because it requires patience instead of action. It is the ability to remain silent, not the silence of resentment, not the silence used to punish others, but the silence that allows truth to reveal itself without interference. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. The moment a conversation slows down, they rush to fill the empty space. They explain more than necessary. They reveal emotions that haven't yet settled. They defend themselves before anyone has accused them. They fear that if they do not constantly speak, they will lose control of the situation. But silence has a strange effect on the human mind. When words disappear, masks begin to slip. People who constantly sought your attention suddenly become quiet themselves. Those who only valued you when you entertained them become impatient. Those who respected you continue to show consistency without demanding reassurance. In other words, silence becomes a mirror. It reflects people's intentions more accurately than endless conversations ever could. Consider how often arguments become larger simply because neither person is willing to pause. One sentence leads to another. Emotions rise, pride takes control. Hours later, both people have spoken hundreds of words they wish they could erase. Yet if one person had chosen silence, not out of weakness, but out of self-control, the outcome might have been completely different. Silence is often mistaken for surrender. In reality, it is frequently a demonstration of discipline. It takes far more strength to resist reacting than it does to react immediately. Anyone can answer an insult with another insult. Anyone can defend themselves at every opportunity. But the person who remains composed while others lose control possesses something far more valuable than a quick response. They possess mastery over themselves. This does not mean accepting disrespect or refusing to communicate when necessary. Healthy relationships require honest conversations. Healthy boundaries require clear words. But there is a difference between speaking with purpose and speaking from emotional impulse. One creates understanding, the other creates confusion. There is another reason silence is powerful. It gives you the opportunity to observe instead of assuming. When you are constantly talking, persuading, or explaining, your attention remains focused on yourself. But when you become quiet, your attention shifts outward. You begin noticing patterns. You notice who interrupts others, who only calls when they need something, who celebrates your success sincerely, and who quietly resents it. These truths are rarely hidden. They are simply drowned out by unnecessary noise. Observation has always been one of the greatest forms of wisdom. People reveal themselves through consistency, not promises. Through actions, not declarations. Time and silence work together as patient teachers. They expose character without confrontation. Many people fear being misunderstood if they stop explaining themselves. Yet those determined to misunderstand you will do so regardless of how carefully you choose your words. Endless explanations often do not create clarity. They create exhaustion. There comes a point where your energy is better spent living your values than defending them. The more comfortable you become with silence, the less you feel compelled to prove yourself. You no longer chase every misunderstanding. You no longer respond to every criticism. You begin recognizing that your peace is too valuable to sacrifice for every opinion that crosses your path. And in that quiet space, something remarkable happens. You stop trying to discover who people claim to be and begin seeing who they truly are, because silence does not hide the truth. It gives the truth room to speak. Once you become comfortable with silence, your attention naturally begins to return to the one place where it has always belonged, your own life. This is the point where many people make a surprising discovery. They realize they were never exhausted because life demanded too much from them. They were exhausted because they were giving their energy away, without asking whether it deserved to be spent. Energy is one of the few resources that cannot be borrowed back. Money can be earned again. Opportunities can return. Even lost time can teach valuable lessons. But the emotional energy you waste on unnecessary conflict, endless drama, and constant people-pleasing quietly drains the quality of your life. Every argument that did not deserve your attention, every opinion that kept you awake at night, every relationship you carried alone, each one asked for a small piece of your strength, until one day you wondered why you felt empty, despite accomplishing so little. Many people believe that being available to everyone makes them admirable. In reality, it often makes them overwhelmed. They answer every phone call, solve every problem, absorb everyone else's emotions, and say yes to commitments they never wanted. They become so busy managing other people's lives that they neglect their own. Eventually, burnout arrives. Not because they lacked kindness, but because they lacked boundaries. There is a profound difference between being compassionate and being consumed. Compassion allows you to care for others while remaining emotionally grounded. Being consumed means carrying burdens that were never yours to carry. The first creates strength. The second creates exhaustion. Observe people who possess a calm and commanding presence. They are rarely rushing from one emotional crisis to another. They are selective about what enters their mind. They understand that every conversation, every relationship, and every environment leaves a psychological imprint. If they constantly surround themselves with negativity, their thinking becomes clouded. If they allow every criticism to enter their heart, their confidence begins to erode. Protecting their inner world is not selfish. It is necessary. This is why saying no is often more valuable than saying yes. Every yes is a commitment of your time, attention, and emotional capacity. When given carelessly, those commitments begin stealing from the goals, relationships, and dreams that matter most. The people who appear disciplined are not simply better at working hard. They are better at deciding what deserves their attention and what does not. Imagine your attention as a garden. If you water every weed simply because it exists, the flowers you truly value will slowly wither. But when you remove distractions and intentionally nourish what matters, the garden begins to flourish. Your career improves. Your relationships become healthier. Your mind grows quieter. Your confidence deepens, not because life has become easier, but because your energy is finally flowing in the right direction. Interestingly, this change also affects how others perceive you. People notice those who move with purpose. They sense when someone is no longer desperate to be included in every conversation or accepted by every group. There is an unmistakable dignity in a person who values their peace enough to protect it, not because they believe they are above others, but because they understand that scattered energy produces a scattered life. Your greatest responsibility has never been to manage everyone's expectations. It has always been to manage your own attention wisely. Once you learn that lesson, distractions lose their power, unnecessary conflicts lose their importance, and your presence gains a quiet strength that cannot be imitated, because the people who protect their energy are the ones who preserve their power. After learning to value your attention, becoming emotionally independent, refusing to chase, embracing silence, and protecting your energy, one final lesson remains. It is the lesson that ties everything together. The truth is, people are not deeply attracted to those who ignore them. They are attracted to those who have stopped ignoring themselves. This is the distinction that changes everything. Many people misunderstand the idea of being unavailable. They believe attraction is created by pretending not to care. They delay replies on purpose. They withdraw affection as a strategy. They use silence as a weapon, hoping to trigger curiosity or insecurity in someone else. For a brief moment, these tactics may seem effective. But anything built on manipulation eventually collapses because it requires constant performance. You become trapped, not in a relationship, but in a game where every move is calculated and every emotion is hidden. Real confidence does not need games. The strongest people are not trying to appear mysterious. They simply have a life that is too meaningful to revolve around winning someone's attention. They are building their character while others are chasing validation. They are strengthening their mind while others are counting who viewed their messages. They are investing in their purpose while others are obsessed with being noticed. As a result, their confidence is not an image they project. It is a reality they have created. This is why genuine attraction feels effortless. It is never forced. When someone respects themselves, that respect naturally influences the way they speak, the way they make decisions, and the way they allow others to treat them. They no longer accept relationships built on inconsistency. They no longer tolerate repeated disrespect simply because they fear being alone. They understand that peace is more valuable than temporary attention. One of the greatest mistakes a person can make is believing that being chosen by someone else will finally make them feel complete. But no relationship can permanently heal the emptiness created by abandoning yourself. If you constantly sacrifice your values, ignore your own needs to keep another person close, the relationship may survive, but your identity slowly disappears. This is why healthy boundaries are so important. A boundary is not a wall that keeps people out. It is a line that protects what matters most within you. It tells the world, I can care about you without betraying myself. I can love you without losing myself. I can walk beside you without forgetting my own direction. The people who truly belong in your life will not fear those boundaries. They will respect them. In fact, healthy relationships become stronger because of them. Mutual respect replaces emotional dependence. Honest communication replaces mind games. Trust replaces constant reassurance. Both people remain free to grow instead of trying to control one another. And if someone walks away because you finally stopped abandoning yourself, let them go without bitterness. Their departure is not always a loss. Sometimes it is proof that your self-respect has become stronger than your fear of rejection. Every ending creates space for relationships that are built on authenticity rather than need. At the end of the day, attraction is not about making people chase you. It is about becoming the kind of person who no longer needs to chase anyone. When your life is guided by purpose instead of approval, when your confidence comes from character instead of compliments, and when your peace becomes more important than pleasing everyone around you, something extraordinary happens. Whether people admire you or ignore you no longer defines your worth. You have already found it within yourself. Because the most attractive person in any room is not the one who seeks attention, but the one who has learned to value themselves enough to never beg for it again.